In this tutorial, I'm going to be going a little bit more complex with the UI. So last tutorial, we did UI control, so that just flashes up a control scheme when you press P. But what we're going to do now is go through how to make an actual like pause menu or main menu. So first thing we need to do, just the same as we did for the UI control, make a user interface widget blueprint. So user widget, I'm going to call this UI pause. I'm just going to call it that. That's fine. So what we need to do, drag in a canvas panel. So I've gone through this stuff in the previous video, so if you want it a little bit more slower, then watch that video. But now, once we've got this, we can add an image just as a bit of a background, and then colour that. So on this appearance, we can see all these types of stuff. So we can then start to change the colour of this, because I don't want it full white, so I'm going to change it to a little bit of a grey. And then what I'm going to do is on panel, so make sure panels drop down, and we want to add in a vertical box. So this is where it starts to uniformly space out things like buttons, which is what I'm going to be showing. So if we drag in a vertical box, and then drag that over here, sort of scale it to how big I want it. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag in a few buttons. So let's say 3. And then if I select all 3 of these buttons, so currently they're going to be spaced right at the top and it's not going to look very nice. So I'm going to select all 3 buttons. So make sure you've got all 3 selected, otherwise you'll have to do this for each one. Whereas if you select them all, you can do it all in the same selection. So I'm going to click fill, and it's going to fill that space out, but I'm also going to add some padding. So you can drop this down and add padding specifically to the top and bottom, but I'm just going to do it all together, and I'm just going to set it to 10, maybe 20. So these are now spaced out fairly evenly and quite large. So what I'm also going to do, I'm going to put some text into the button. So with buttons, you can drag text onto it, and it sort of centers the text into it. You can only put a text block in it though. You can't put things like images. If you wanted to change the image, you'd have to do style. So select the button, on the appearance style, then normal, hovered or pressed, and then change the images here. But what we can do, just put some text in just to see if it works. And I'm going to call this resume. Do one of options, but I'm not going to do an options screen, just so it's a button there. And then do one for quit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do code on how to make it resume. Quit wouldn't actually work unless you're playing it in a standalone thing, but there's a very simple thing for a quit button. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to rename these buttons to what they actually do. So I'm going to rename these. So I've got resume, options and quit, and I've got the buttons to match. So what I then want to do is go to the graph. So at the very top right, you can see designer here, and then graph next to it. So this is where we can do a bit of code with the UI. So what I want to do is button resume. So I want to not drag it in, select it, and then on the bottom left here, I want to do it when it's clicked. So when resume is clicked, when quit is clicked, and when options is clicked. So I'm just going to leave options blank because I'm not going to show any options. That's quite complex. But if we do button quit, so if we're wanting a quit button, all we need to do is search quit. So I drag off the execute, do quit game, and then that will literally just quit the game. I believe this only works if you're doing it in a standalone launcher of the game rather than just in the editor. But then resume, we're going to take some of the code that we put into the third person. So what we want to do, we're wanting to get rid of this. So when we press P, pause the game, but then we don't want it when we press P. Oh, I just messed up. Okay, so we only want it where when we press P it pauses, because we only want it now when we press resume it unpauses. If we press P again, then it'd unpause without us pressing resume, and it'd defeat the purpose of having a resume button. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set visibility, but because it's within the UI now, we only need the target itself. We don't need a reference to itself. So we're going to set this as hidden, and then set game paused as false. And then there's a couple of other things. So what we need to do, we need to do some stuff in the pause and the third person character. So what we need to do, we need to get controller, so I'll get player controller, and we need to change the input mode. So what we're going to do, drag off of the player controller and search set input mode. What did I just type? Input mode. So we want it as game and UI only. So if we link that up, it'll make it so we can start clicking on things, but we also want to drag off this show mouse cursor. So set mouse cursor, set that to true, untick that just to make sure. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set the visibility of the menu. We're going to change this menu to the pause menu rather than the control screen. We're going to pause the game, and then we're also going to have it where we can click the buttons and also show the mouse cursor. So what we then want to do in here, we want to reverse all of those options that we just did. So we want to get player controller. We want to set input mode game only. So this will take off the UI control that we had, and drag off here, show mouse cursor, set that to false. So then if I change this to pause, should be that when I press P, or not, so there's an error coming up. Ah, that's why. Silly me. So this is currently only getting a reference to the UI control. So what we need to do, make a new variable. So pause reference, and then link that up. So we want to replace that with that. So if you drag it onto it, it can replace it. Sometimes it bugs out, so you might want to delete it, get another get, and link that back up. So make sure all the references are correct, and then hopefully this now works. Oh, silly me. So one last thing. So I did this in the previous tutorial, forgot to do it now. So we need to set this as hidden by default. So now it should work. So press P, the game's now paused. Then when we resume, it's unpaused. Press P again, it's paused, do that. Quit. Ah, it does work. So it stops the play. So it's just like pressing escape, press quit, and it stops playing. One other thing is I believe I forgot to set the anchor. Silly. So I'll set the anchor there, and it should then look fine when we pause it. Oh, that's gone wild. Is there a reason for that? Maybe if you drag these corners, sometimes if you make it sort of encapsulate that entire area. No, that's gone wild. Anyway, let's just set the anchor back, because that's not too important at this stage. So there we are. It's looking fairly okay. So then when we resume, it does that. So that's how to do a more complex UI thing with a menu.